Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to work with files, with text files in Android. So what I've done so far is I've just created a new project and then I've created a new Java file. So basically you go into your folder, right click there and say new Java class. And then creating that class with the name person. And in this class you can see it's a simple Java class. It's one of the most basic Java classes. I've got some private fields, name and surname, and then I've got the constructor there that accepts a name and a surname and set our object's name and surname. And then we've got a set name to set the name, set the surname, and then return the name for the getName method and return the surname for the getSurname method. So it's basically just a simple person class that we're going to use with this activity to save some person objects or data for person objects. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is just to quickly go into the activity main XML, and we're just going to change a few things here. I'm going to change the relative layout there to a linear layout and make it Android, or the orientation, make the orientation vertical. And then I'm going to remove this text view so that we've got a blank page going on there. Okay, so what I want to do now is to just ask the guy for his name, because on this person class we've got a name and a surname. So I'm just going to ask him for his name and his surname, and I'm going to use two plain texts for those, or plain text fields. So we're going to have two there, one for the name and one for the surname. And then I'm going to add a button. So let's add a button there, and we're going to add another button there. And then at the end, we're just going to display our data in a medium text field right at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to have for this one, for the two buttons, let's just create or set the width to match the parent for both of them. Okay, so that's the two buttons. Now normally we should go to the strings XML in order to add some text here, but I'm just going to do the hint quickly there, so don't do this. Normally we just add this in the strings XML. So we're going to say something like enter name, and then for this one the hint will be enter surname. And then for the button, the text on the button, we're going to have add, and the text on that button will be save data to file. Okay, there we go. And then for these two, let's just create, there's the normal gravity property, and we're going to say center horizontal. Okay, and then for this one, let's just add some margin at the top. So I'm going to say margin at the top of, let's say 10 dp, just to move it down a bit. And for that one also margin at the top, 10 dp, just to move them down a bit. So we're going to enter the name and the surname. Then when we click on add, we will add it to this medium text. And then ultimately when we say save data to the file, it will save it to the text file. So the next time you run the application, it will show in the medium text. So we need some IDs for these. So I'm just going to double click and let's set the ID as, it's an edit text. So I'm going to say et name for the edit text. For this one, let's make it et surname. For those, we're going to have methods. And then for this last one, which is a text view, we're going to say tv, let's just say results. Okay, then for our main activity, so these are basically the components that we're going to use. So for the main activity, let's just quickly set up those components. So we've got some edit text there. Let's just import that edit text there. So we're going to say edit text et name, and we're going to have an et surname. Just an et surname. And then we've got a text view there. So we're going to say tv results. That's the text view, and then we're going to have some buttons. So we're going to set up the buttons now. So et name will be an edit text. So we're going to say for this one, find the view by its ID, and we called it et name. And then the same for et surname. It will also be an edit text. We'll find the view by its ID, r.id.et surname. And then for the text view, it will be tv results. And in this case, it's going to be a text view. find the view by its ID, r.id. And we call it TV results. Okay, so those are set up. Now another thing that we want, or let's just quickly do the buttons for those that we created, the add button and the save data to file. So we're going to say public void btn add, let's just call it add data. Need to have a view object in brackets, which will be the button that was clicked, and then we're going to have a public void btn save data. Okay, so we've got add data and save data. So if we go back, or save quickly, go back to activity main, click on the add button, and let's just go down to the on-click property, and I'm going to select for that one add data, and for this one save data. Okay, so now the two buttons are connected to the methods, and these three components are connected in coding. So we've basically connected everything that we need there from the layout perspective. So another thing that we want to use here is I'm going to use an array list to save all my person objects. So this array list will be of type person, and I'm going to call it persons. Alt enter for your import there, and then we will set it up in coding as well. So we'll just say persons equal new array list of type person. Okay, and that one is then also set up. Okay, so for the next part, let's just do this btn add data part. So what we're going to do now is we're going to type the name and the surname. As if it clicks on add, we're going to add that new person object to the array list, and then at the same time show it in the medium text there. Okay, so what we're going to do then is to say, let's say string name equals etname dot getText dot toString, and then also string surname equals etsurname dot getText dot toString. Remember, we could have left out these two variables to declare. We could have done it an easier way. This is just easier to explain this way. So we're going to say person. We can create the new person object now equals new person, and then the first argument will be the guy's name, and the second argument will be the surname. So now we created a new person object. So we could have just said, instead of name there, we could have said etname.getText.toString, which would have been better. Okay, and then we're going to say persons.add. So we're going to add this person to, or this new person that we created, to the persons array list. Okay, and now I'm going to do a method that's going to be called set text to text view, because we're going to do this a few times. So if you hover over it and use Alt Enter, you can say create this method for me. Okay, so there's the method. The method is created. Let's just quickly do this method. So I'm going to say string text equals, well, just nothing to start with. Then we're going to run a for loop. Now remember that we could click the add data button a few times, so there could be a few objects already in persons. So we need to run through every one of those persons those person objects inside of this specific array list. So we're going to say integer I equals 0, I less than persons, the array list dot size, running through every element in the array list, and then saying I++ to increment every time. And then what we want to do is to say that text equals text plus the persons array list dot get I, which will get the person object, and we're going to say dot get name to show the guy's name, and then just a space, and then the guy's surname. So we're going to say persons again dot get I to get the person object, dot get surname for the second one, and then we're just going to go to a new line there. So just make sure that every person that we add to it will go to a new line. Okay, so, and then after this for loop, remember now the for loop will run through every person object inside of the person's array list, and when it's done, we've got everything in text on the text variable. So then we're just going to say TV results dot set text, and we're going to set the text to this text that was displayed, or the text that we got there from the for loop. So after calling set text to text view, we run through the whole array list to basically set the text to the medium text there. Okay, so now the next part will be to actually save the data. So this is the new part where we need to save data to a text file. So how do we save data to a text file? The first thing that we need to do before, or when working with files, is we need to know that there could be some exceptions. So we need to have a try and a catch there. And for this catch, I'm just going to use the IO input-output exception. So it's going to give me a problem there because we don't have anything that could actually throw the IO exception there. So the first thing that we need to do then now is to use the file output stream class. So we're going to say file output stream, whatever you want to call it, equals open file output. And this will basically open up the file for us. So the first argument is what is the file's name. So we're going to call it data.txt. And then the second argument will be the mode. So the mode there, you can see there's different modes that you can choose from. World readable, writable. We're going to choose mode private, which means that only our application will have access to this file. So basically this will create the file if it does not exist, called data.txt, and it will open it up only for our application. And then with this file output stream, we're going to use a class called output stream writer. And then we're going to call it something like output file equals new output stream writer. And we're going to pass in this file object, which has now got a connection to the file that we want to create or open up to start writing data to. And now, because all of our data is basically in this person's array list, we need to run through every element in that person's array list again, like we did here, in order to write it to the file. So I'm going to say for integer I equals 0, I less than that person's dot size, I plus plus there. And then we're going to call that output file object of ours, that one that we have a link now to the file also. So that output file, there's a method called write that we're going to use. And now we just need to write basically text to this specific file. Okay, so in order to write the text, we will just say persons.getI, which is the object, the person object, dot get name, plus then we're going to put a comma there in the file. So we're going to first show the guy's name, then a comma, and then directly after that we're going to show his surname. So we're going to say persons dot get I again, which will be the person object, and then we're going to say get surname. And then when we're done with that, we want to make sure that we're going to go to a new line when we start writing this. So every line or new line will actually represent a new person in our array list. Okay, and then the last thing that we need to do normally is to close the file. So I'm just going to say output file dot, before we close it, we're going to call flush. Now the flush method will just help us to make sure that everything, all the data or all the bytes has been written to the file. And then after that we can call output file dot close to close the file. And then we can just say something to the user like successfully saved. And then in the exception part also, we can just show the message there. So in this part, I'm just going to basically say the e.getMessage, which will get the message. Okay, so that's it for saving data to the file. So the next thing that we want to do is to actually load this data that was saved. So we're going to say public void, and we're going to create a method that's called load data. And this load data method will basically just read everything from the file into our person's array list. So we're going to create objects. And where I want to call this load data method is actually right at the start after creating this person's array list. I'm just going to call load data. So when the application starts, we load the data from the database or from the file, and then everything gets set to the text view, and then we can add some more to it. Okay, so in the load data method, the first thing that we want to make sure of is that that person's the person's array list is actually cleared, so that we don't have duplicates in it. So there we created. So obviously when we just call load data right at the beginning, persons will already not have any data in it. But if you want to use this load data anywhere else, then we must just make sure that you clear it. For this application, not really necessary. Okay, now in order to actually just see if the file that we want to read from actually exists, we need to use this normal java.io.file class. So we're going to say file, whatever you want to call it, equals get application context dot get file stream path, and then you're going to indicate the file that you want to search for. So in this case, this is the file that we want. We want to read from data.txt because there we've written to data.txt. So now in order to read from this, I'm just going to declare a variable there that's going to be one line from the file, or we're going to read that one line from the file. So the first thing I'm going to do is to just test if this file dot exists. So the dot exists method there will help me to just see if that file data.txt actually exists on this specific phone. So if it does not exist, we don't want to load any data. So obviously right at the beginning, we're not going to, or it will not go into this if statement because we won't have any data. Okay, but if there's data, if the file does exist, then when working with files, we need to go and have a look at the try catch statement again, and in this case also an IO exception, input output exception. Okay, so let's see how to read from a file. So we're going to use a class called the buffered reader, and let's just call it reader equals new buffered reader, and then in brackets we're going to pass in an input stream reader, and for that one, for the input stream reader, we're going to call the method open file input, and then indicate the file that you want to open. Okay, so everything in one line. We could have said input stream reader whatever equals new input stream reader open file input data.txt, and then in the second line said buffered reader equals new buffered reader, and then just passing in the input stream reader object. So basically just doing everything in one line. So what does this one line do? We just basically opening up this data.txt file for reading. Okay, so now when we want to read from it, we can use this while loop. So I'm going to use a while loop that says line from file equals, and then that reader object, and then I'm going to call dot read line, and then just test if that read line is not equal to null. Okay, I'm going to explain this now. Okay, so inside of this while loop, basically this line from file will get the value of reader.readLine. So reader.readLine will read one line from that file called data.txt every time the while loop runs, and then save that one line into line from file. So this line from file will actually have that line that was read. And then we're just testing if that line that was read from the file is not equal to null. So it actually contains something. Then we're going to go into the while. Otherwise, the while loop will stop. Then we're at the end of the file, or the file is just basically empty. Okay, now I'm going to use a string tokenizer class, or the string tokenizer class, in order to tokenize the string. So we're going to say string tokenizer tokens equals new string tokenizer. And then in brackets, we need two arguments there. The first one is the string that you want to tokenize, which will be the line from the file. And then the delimiter will be the comma. So let me just quickly explain this again. Our text file could look something like this now. So we could have Chuck, Norris, Peter, Pollock, John, Rambo, and so forth. Now remember, when we've written it, we said we pass in the guy's name and then a comma and then the guy's surname. So if you look at our text file, it could look something like this. The guy's name, comma, surname. So this is every line as a new person. So if I want to retrieve this line, we read the one line and then we tokenize this line, which means we extract the tokens. So the tokens here will be separated by the comma there, which will be my delimiter. So I will have two tokens, Chuck and Norris. For the second line, two tokens again, Peter and Pollock, and so forth. So that's basically what we're doing with the string tokenizer. We're basically saying line from file, like Chuck, Norris, and then what is separating the tokens? It's the comma that separates the tokens. Okay, so now for the string tokenizer, we're going to, or after the string tokenizer, we can set up this new person object now. So we're going to say person equals new person. Now again, we accept the guy's surname or the name first. So we can just go to tokens dot next token, which will retrieve basically the name, and then comma for the surname. It will also be tokens dot next token, the next token. So with the first time we call next token, it's actually going to take let's say this is the first line. So the first time we call tokens.next token, it's going to extract Chuck only. And then the next time we call tokens.next token, it's going to extract Norris. And that's how we're building this new person object. Okay, and then we're going to say persons.add, and we're going to add this new person object. So in this while loop, you can see that every time we are reading a line from the file, tokenizing that line and creating a new person object and adding that person object to the array list. And then when we're done with this while loop, then we're just going to say that reader of ours dot close, just to close down the file. And then when we're done with this, we're going to call that set text to text view. So we read all the data from the file, calling load data. It's all been added to persons, which is the array list of person objects, and then set text to text view is this method at the bottom. Where is it now? There's the set text to text view that basically runs a for loop and sets all the text to TB results. Okay, so that's basically reading from a file. Let's just add the toast here if there's something went wrong there. We can just say e.getMessage in order to show the message if something went wrong. So load data we called there. So right at the beginning it will load the data from the file, and then by using the buttons we can add new data and then save it to the file. Okay, so let's see how this application runs. Because there's the Android virtual device. Let's just quickly run it. So there's the Nexus device. I'm going to say OK, and let's see how it runs. Okay, there we go. It's actually running the app. Okay, there we go. So we're going to enter a name there. So you can see that the medium text are just showing nothing at this stage because we loaded that file now and then nothing happened because there's nothing in the file. So I'm going to enter the name. Let's say Chuck and Norris. And I'm going to say add. As soon as I said add, then my add method actually added it to added a new person object called Chuck Norris, and that was added to the array list. So let's add something again. Let's add John Rambo and say add again. So now I can see Chuck Norris and John Rambo, and now I can save the data to the file. It will then say successfully saved. Okay, so let's just exit this application quickly. Exit, and I exit some of these as well. While they're open, go to text files, Android. It now loads the data, and there you can see Chuck Norris and John Rambo has been loaded. Okay, so I think it's working fine. So this is working with text files. Hope you've enjoyed this video.